Hello everyone and welcome to my YouTube channel. Watch my video and subscribe my channel. In the middle of the Spencer Forrester celebration, the air thick with champagne bubbles and glittering laughter, Sheila Carter suddenly rose from the shadows like a ghost no one expected. Her eyes locked on Luna Nozwa as if she had been waiting her entire life for this one decisive moment, and when her gravelly voice cracked the party's illusion with the thunderous declaration, "I can't let you hurt anyone else." The room froze in shock, forks clattering, music screeching to silence, and Luna's face, pale beneath the disguise of charm she had worn all night, twisted in a flash of recognition and fury, for she had thought she was clever enough to slither undetected into yet another gathering, weaving her poison through whispers and seductions. But Sheila, of all people, had been the one to notice, the one to track her movements, the one to gather fragments of proof until this very second. And now Sheila, trembling with a strange blend of maternal desperation and righteous fury, pointed a shaking finger as gasps rippled through the crowd, calling for everyone to see the danger they had ignored, demanding they open their eyes to the wolf in their midst. And with her other hand she reached for her phone, pressing 911 right there in front of Bill Spencer, Ridge Forrester, Stuffy, Hope, Finn, Poppy, and Stunley, whose lips parted in disbelief because the woman she had sworn was gone, the niece she claimed to have lost, was standing alive, dangerous and exposed. Police dispatcher's voice echoing through the speaker as Sheila shouted for them to come immediately. That Luna Nozwa was alive, armed with more than secrets, guilty of blood and betrayal, and capable of striking again at any second. And the room, once glittering, fractured into chaos as alliances began to splinter, Bill lunging toward Liam to shield him instinctively as though danger itself had manifested, Ridge demanding order, Hope crying out for the truth, Steffi retreating closer to Finn, who could not quite process that his cousin had been hiding in plain sight, while Luna, wild-eyed and desperate, screamed that Sheila was lying, that she was being framed, that none of them could trust a word from a woman with Sheila's past. But her protests fell like brittle glass shattering against the wall of Sheila's ferocious conviction, because in this moment Sheila, so often branded as the villain, stood paradoxically as protector, voice rising, vein straining, as she promised she would, not let another soul fall victim to Luna's twisted games. And as the wail of approaching sirens pierced the night, the truth became inescapable, that this party, meant for joy, had transformed into a battlefield where every secret would detonate, every allegiance would be tested, and every heart would be shattered before the night was done. As the sirens grew louder and the first blue and red lights began to flash through the windows of the Forrester estate, panic erupted like wildfire across the room, with Katie clutching Will protectively while Donna staggered back in disbelief, her glass of champagne slipping from her hand and crashing against the marble floor, the sound sharp enough to make even Ridge flinch, and in the middle of it all Luna's voice cracked like an animal cornered, insisting she had been wronged, insisting Sheila was projecting her own sins. But the harder she pleaded, the more transparent her desperation became. For every glance she cast toward the exit betrayed her intent to run. Every twitch of her hands suggested the fight-or-flight impulse was surging to the surface. And Sheila, her chest heaving with the adrenaline of a woman who knew she was putting everything on the line, snarled that she had seen the look in Luna's eyes before, the same look she herself once wore when cornered, the look of someone who had already crossed lines of morality and would cross them again without hesitation. And that was when Lee finally broke from her trance, her voice trembling but steely as she whispered that this could not be real, that she had buried Luna, that she had made peace with the tragedy, that she had endured the grief. But the sight before her mocked her every claim, and with a sudden, chilling realization sweeping the guests, whispers of Lee lied, and she covered it up, began rippling through the party like poison gas, setting off a chain reaction of suspicion that made Bill narrow his eyes and Ridge stiffen with fury, while Hope's breath caught in her throat as she realized that Liam, still fragile from his recent traumas, was standing in the blast radius of yet another explosive truth, and though he tried to steady himself, the weakness in his frame was undeniable. So Bill moved in closer, voice rough as he muttered that he wouldn't let anyone, Sheila, Luna, or even Lee, destroy his son again, which only made Steffi tremble with the echoes of Finn's anguished cries the night he learned of his mother's deception about his own. Near death, and now history, seemed to be repeating itself in grotesque fashion as Lee's own web of secrets unraveled before her colleagues, her family, and her enemies, while the police stormed through the front doors, guns at the ready, demanding identification, demanding calm, demanding Luna step away from the crowd, but Luna, her mask finally cracked, chose defiance instead of surrender, shoving a chair across the floor to create a barrier as she hissed that none of them understood, that they had all used her, abandoned her, manipulated her, and now they were trying to erase her all over again, her tirade swelling until her voice broke into a guttural sob. And in that instant, every person in the room realized they were not just looking at a fugitive. They were looking at a fractured soul spiraling into chaos. And though Sheila could have reveled in being vindicated, she instead stepped closer, palms raised in a rare gesture of peace, telling Luna that she knew the darkness, intimately, that she had lived it, breathed it, almost drowned in it, but she was not about to let Luna drag another innocent life under with her, her voice breaking on the words, "I can't let you hurt anyone else," repeating them like a vow to herself, to the crowd, and to the world, and though the officers advanced, cautiously, waiting for the signal to close in, the weight of Sheila's words sank deeper into everyone's chest, forcing them to confront the unthinkable possibility that Sheila Carter, long the villainess of Los Angeles, had just become the city's unlikely savior, standing between a dangerous young woman and the family she once longed to destroy, rewriting her legacy in one harrowing night of confrontation and chaos, while outside the flashing lights painted the estate like a crime scene, and helicopters began circling overhead, ready to broadcast the scandal to every living room in America, as the cameras from the circling news choppers captured the flashing chaos. Luna's body trembled with the realization that she had no way out, yet desperation makes monsters braver than they should be, and in one sharp move she bolted toward the French doors leading to the terrace, shoving past stunned guests as shrieks erupted, Katie crying out for Will, while Donna shielded her face and Ridge barked for security to block her path. But Luna was quick, feral, clawing at anything in her way, her nails leaving red welts on Carter's arm as he tried to hold her back, and Sheila, knowing too well that law enforcement's hesitation could end in tragedy, lunged forward with surprising speed, grabbing Luna's wrist and dragging her down with the strength of a woman fighting her own sins, the two of them crashing against the hors d'oeuvres table, shattering glass and spilling wine that looked like blood across the floor, and for a moment the sight was so violent, so raw, that everyone froze in horror, the tableau of past and present villains locked in mortal struggle, until Finn, driven by equal parts duty as a doctor and family ties, moved to pry them apart, but Luna, wild-eyed and shrieking, twisted free and seized a shard of broken crystal from the wreckage, brandishing it like a knife, her voice breaking as she swore she would not be caged again. She would not be buried alive by lies, and she would not let Sheila or Lee or anyone else dictate her fate, and the officers, weapons drawn, shouted at her to drop it, their commands echoing over the gasps of the party guests, while Bill tightened his hold on Liam, who could barely stand upright, whispering that he wouldn't lose his son again, not tonight, not ever, and Hope, tears streaking her face, pleaded for Luna to stop, begging her to think of her own mother, begging her to see reason. But Luna's stare was wild, hollow, feral, until Sheila, her voice low, trembling, more human than anyone had ever heard it, told Luna she knew exactly what it felt like to be cornered, to be hated, to have everyone see you as nothing but a villain. But there came a moment when you had to choose if you would let that story define you forever, or if you would stop yourself before the darkness consumed everything. And those words, so unexpected, sent a ripple of stunned silence through the crowd, because Sheila Carter was not just exposing Luna tonight. She was laying bare her own redemption, and for a flicker of a second Luna's hand wavered, the shard glinting in the strobe of the siren lights. But then Lee stepped forward, voice like steel, as she cried that Luna was a disgrace, that she should never have lived, that she had been right to keep her hidden, and those brutal words shattered whatever fragile hesitation had existed, igniting a scream from Luna so piercing it rattled the chandeliers. And in that moment she lunged not at Sheila, not at Lee, but toward the open terrace, slashing the air with the crystal shard as the officers surged after her, tackling her to the ground just before she could leap into the night, her body writhing against their grip, curses spilling like venom as they forced the weapon from her hand and snapped cold steel cuffs around her wrists, the sound echoing like a death knell across the room, and as the police read her rights in a firm monotone. Luna's sobs twisted into laughter, a chilling, broken cackle that made even Ridge shudder, while Sheila stood bloodied but unbowed, chest heaving, whispering again through tears that she could not let Luna hurt anyone else, and for once the room saw her not as the monster of their nightmares, but as a mother who had finally chosen to protect rather than destroy, and yet beneath the fragile relief there pulsed a deeper horror, for if Lee had faked Luna's death once, if Luna had returned more dangerous than ever, then what other secrets were buried under the surface of this family, waiting to erupt and tear them all apart. As the officers dragged Luna's thrashing body through the glitter-stained foyer, her laughter cutting through the night like the sound of broken glass underfoot, every guest at the Forrester estate was left trembling in a fog of disbelief, the once lavish celebration now desecrated with overturned tables, shattered glasses, and blood-red wine soaking the floor like an omen. And while the police radios crackled with codes and updates, Sheila stood frozen in the wreckage, clutching her armwear. Luna's shard had nicked her skin, crimson staining her sleeve, yet her eyes were steady, her breathing sharp, and for the first time in decades there was no smirk, no manipulation, only a raw determination in her gaze as she whispered, almost to herself, that she had done the right thing. She had finally done something good, though the guests around her were too stunned to fully accept that truth, some glaring with suspicion, others averting their eyes as if ashamed they had needed Sheila of all people to protect them. And then the dam of silence broke with Lee's voice, sharp as a whip, cutting through the room as she screamed that none of this should have happened, that Sheila was exploiting a tragedy, that Luna was not the monster Sheila painted her to be, but rather a girl driven mad by lies and abandonment, her words trembling with the unmistakable guilt of someone who had held back truths too long, and Finn, torn between his Hippocratic oath and his shredded trust in his mother, demanded to know why Lee had ever said Luna was dead, why she had let them all mourn, why she had sworn to protect their family's honor if all she was doing was nurturing another cycle of violence, his voice cracking under the weight of betrayal, while Steffi clutched his arm, whispering that he shouldn't get drawn in, that Sheila was playing them all, though her own eyes flicked with unease as she replayed the moment Sheila had put herself in harm's way to protect them, and nearby Biljaw, clenched, pulled Liam closer, brushing his son's hair back like he had when Liam was a boy, his voice low as he swore he wouldn't let anyone, neither Lee's lies nor Luna's madness nor Sheila's chaos, destroy his family again, but Hope, unable to tear her eyes from Luna's exit, whispered that maybe Sheila wasn't lying, maybe for once she had tried to protect them, her words shaking as they slipped into the tense air, sparking a fresh round of outrage from Ridge, who bellowed that nobody should dare defend Sheila, that whatever Luna had done, it didn't erase decades of blood on Sheila's hands. Yet even as he roared, his voice carried a note of unease, because deep down he too had seen the flicker of humanity in Sheila's eyes when she said she couldn't let anyone else be hurt. And as the guests argued in fractured clusters, the estate echoing with accusations, whispers, and the clatter of police boots, Luna's shrill laughter still lingered in their ears like a curse, promising that this night was only the beginning, that her arrest was not an ending, but the spark to ignite an inferno that would consume them all. And as the flashing lights outside began to fade into the distance, carrying Luna toward the sterile coldness of a police station cell, the fractures, left behind in the Forrester Spencer Logan Finnegan web were spreading like cracks in a mirror. Sheila's bloody sleeve a symbol of her twisted redemption. Lee's denials unraveling into exposure. Bill's protectiveness swelling into obsession. Hope's faith in truth clashing with Ridge's loyalty to family. And Finn's heart splitting between the mother who raised him, the wife he loved, and the chaotic force who might have just saved them all. Every beat of the night reverberating with the certainty that nothing, no marriage, no friendship, no alliance, would survive untouched by the explosion of Luna's exposure. Yet even as the guests tried to steady themselves in the wreckage of the ruined party, the echo of sirens fading down the hill, the damage inside the house continued to multiply because every pair of eyes landed on Lee, her usually composed face pale and brittle under the chandelier glow, and when Ridge demanded answers in his booming voice, insisting that she explain how a supposedly dead girl could walk into their lives with fury and violence, Lee faltered for the first time in her career of control, stammering that she had acted to protect the family, that Luna had been unstable from the beginning, that burying the truth had been the only way to contain her. But Finn's anguished gasp sliced through her excuses like a scalpel, his words cracking as he asked if his mother had once again chosen deception over healing, if she had learned nothing from faking his own death, and Steffi clutched his arm, urging him to let it go, to remember that Lee had only wanted what was best, but Finn shook his head with tears brimming, confessing that maybe Sheila, in all her flaws, had been the only one to confront reality tonight, a statement that made Ridge erupt in fury and Hope tremble with vindication, while Bill, eyes dark with rage, muttered that he didn't give a damn about redemption arcs, that all he cared about was keeping Liam alive and sane after everything he'd been through, and he swore then and there that if Lee had played a role in unleashing Luna back into their lives, would make sure she paid as dearly as Sheila ever had, his threat dripping with Spencer steel. And across the room Donna whispered that maybe they were cursed, that every celebration ended in blood, that happiness was nothing but a fragile illusion in this family, her words sending a shiver across Katie's spine as she tightened her hold on Will. While outside the flashing lights retreated with Luna screaming in the back of the cruiser, her face pressed against the glass as she spat curses at Sheila, promising revenge, promising that they hadn't seen the last of her. And when she arrived at the precinct, the chaos only grew worse. Cameras from gossip outlets swarming the entrance as officers dragged her inside, her laughter morphing into taunts as she shouted that her own mother had betrayed her, that Lee Finnegan was the real criminal, that Sheila Carter had only exposed part of the truth, daring the world to dig deeper into the rotten core of the Forrester Spencer Finnegan empire. And as reporters relayed every poisonous word live on air, the ripple effect exploded back at the estate where cell phones buzzed with alerts, guests huddling around glowing screens, watching the scandal unfold in real time, every headline casting doubt, every cheerin' pairing Sheila's name with the word savior, every image of Luna in cuffs a reminder that secrets could never stay buried in this town, and Lee's voice cracked as she begged them not to believe the spin. But her pleas fell flat against the tidal wave of suspicion, leaving her isolated in a sea of glares, while Sheila, of all people, was suddenly surrounded by an aura of fragile credibility, standing with her arms still bleeding, yet her head held high, as if she had been waiting her entire life to be the one who told the truth, and though Ridge still thundered about never trusting her, though Steffi hissed that she would never forgive, though Bill vowed to crush anyone who endangered Liam, there was no denying the unease in the room, the recognition that the balance of good and evil had shifted on its axis tonight, and the name Sheila Carter, long synonymous with terror, was now woven into the narrative of reluctant savior, a contradiction that none of them could yet reconcile as the night stretched on like a nightmare without end at the precinct, the fluorescent. Lights hummed with sterile indifference as Luna was dragged into an interrogation room, her wrists red and raw from the cuffs, her hair wild, her eyes glassy with a mixture of rage and desperation. And though the officers tried to press her for answers, asking where she had been hiding, who had helped her, what her intentions at the party truly were, she twisted every question into venom against her family, spitting that Lee was the liar, That Lee had staged her death to silence her, that Lee had forced her into shadows like a dirty secret, and every syllable carried the weight of a truth no one wanted to face because cameras had been allowed just beyond the glass. Reporters pressed against the frosted window, straining to capture sound bites, and soon the words, "Lee Finnegan faked niece's death," began scrolling across screens all over Los Angeles, echoing through the estate where guests clutched their phones, gasping as headlines turned from scandal to indictment, and Finn, pale as a ghost, sank into a chair as he whispered that his entire childhood, his entire family, had been built on lies, Steffi kneeling beside him whispering promises that she would hold him together. But her own eyes darted with unease every time Sheila's name was mentioned in contrast with Lee's, and Ridge tried to reclaim control of the narrative, barking that the only villain here was Sheila, that Luna was parroting Sheila's manipulations. Yet, even as he spoke, Bill growled that maybe for once Sheila had been the only one to act with honesty, which made Hope turn, tears on her cheeks, and nod in fragile agreement, her voice rising as she asked if anyone else had seen the way Sheila had stepped in front of danger, the way she had put herself between Luna and the rest of them. And though Ridge scoffed, the room was alive with fractured loyalties, alliances buckling under pressure as years of grudges tangled with tonight's revelations. While at the station, Luna leaned across the metal table, her voice low and conspiratorial as she told the detectives that she had proof that Lee had hidden medical records, falsified reports, erased evidence of her survival. And if they dug deep enough, they'd find more than just one cover-up. They'd find a pattern, a trail of deceit that stretched back to Finn's shooting, to every moment Lee had claimed to be protecting her family while she was in fact playing God. And when Sheila arrived at the station, because of course she followed the police, her arm bandaged, her expression raw, the tension doubled, officers demanding she stay back, but Luna's laughter filled the room as she shrieked through the glass that Sheila was trying to wear a halo.